as well. Okay, here we go. Okay, so briefly, what is, am I sharing the correct screen here? Can everyone see my screen? Can somebody just confirm in the chat? Okay, now everyone should be able to see my screen. Let me just double check. Okay, all right, so I'll start. What is EDI? So EDI is a form of electronic document transfers with partners or vendors that you do business with. And this is, and as I'm sure most of you will know, or maybe all of you, this is when you work with companies such as Walmart, Canadian Tire, Costco, and all the big retail chain stores in Canada and the US or all over the world, basically. It's a standard communications, it's a standard communications protocol with standard formats so that it is the same across all businesses. And so what it is that it requires a translation. So the documents are all sent in plain text, or not plain text, it's in characters, different characters. And I could perhaps just show briefly a document, such a document. I didn't pull that up here on time. Let me just go and open up one of those documents to show it here. And so what it is, it's a document in specific format in characters. And so that document needs to be translated into a human readable format. And not only that, it also then needs to be translated into a file format so that it can be imported into Spire. And so that is what we have automated, and that is, very briefly, that is the system that we have developed. So EDI for Spire is exactly that. So here, just as an example, this is an EDI file that was sent from Costco to a company that does sell to Costco. And so this is it. And so if you look at this document, you can make out that it has to do with an order, and there is some text in here that would show that it is relevant to whatever order is being placed. But then you see there's a lot of basically what I would call gibberish in here, and different initials for different rows. And so it's a raw data file, again in the EDI format. And so that's what now needs to be translated into a human readable file. And second, also to now get those orders into Spire as well. And so again, that's what EDI for Spire is, and that's what I'm gonna show today in this webinar. So the EDI Spire is made up of a couple modules or different areas of the system, different screens. And I'm just going to start a little bit briefly on what it takes to get going with the setup. So the first is to set up a company in here in the system. And this is generally something that we would do for you if you were interested in getting this all going for you. So we set up a company, and then the next step is to set up trading partners. And now from a trading partner perspective, all trading partners have different requirements, generally speaking. Some go as far as simply, you exchange a few test files and off you go. So for example, Costco, they do all of their EDI in-house. And so then essentially with them, when you sign up, you just have to make sure that you send them a couple sample files. They send them back to you. They tell us, in this case, we'd be doing that for you if you were to sign up for the service. They tell us, okay, we need to have these few changes here and there. So it's really simple with Costco. So you just essentially exchange files. And then also, second is that some companies have more requirements, and there's these different different files that that they exchange. And so I will just show one record here. This is a Costco. This is a demo setup, and this is a Costco setup. And so then it totally depends on what the company actually requires in terms of documents. So the most popular documents are what's called the 850. It's a purchase order. So a Costco, for example, sends a purchase order. In the communications that happens between Costco and us to get those documents, that is the whole standard of how EDI works. And so that's the service on top of just the application stuff. That's a service that we provide as well. So you can send documents directly to us, and we translate those documents and get them into Spire, and you manage them in Spire, and then of course you send back the documents that are required. So the most important document to start is the 850, and that is the purchase order. So that's a purchase order that a company would issue. So then, for example, Costco does do the 850, of course. And they also do the 860. The 860, it's the same as an 850, but it's a correction. So for example, if an 850 was sent, a purchase order was sent via EDI, then you now have, they may issue an 860 for that same purchase order number. And that just means they're making a correction. So perhaps a mistake was made, and then they send a correction to correct the initial 850 with an 860. So those are the two most popular. And then the second one is the invoice. When you invoice this partner, then that's the other one. Those are actually the three. 850 and 860 is the same document type, so it's considered as one document. And the invoice is the second one. And so those are the two most popular documents that any company will exchange with you when you do business with them. And then additional documents are such as the ASN, PO acknowledgement. A purchase order acknowledgement is essentially where you reply. This is like essentially in your email. Let's say this was same as email. You reply to the 850 and you say that, yes, we can fulfill all of the items that were ordered. No, we can't. This is how many we can't. This is how many we are going to put on back order for you. So that's essentially just a reply to say you acknowledge it, and you say whether you can fulfill it or not. And that's then now a document that is being sent back to them. And again, you create that in Spire, and I will briefly go into this once I look at the actual documents. And then you reply to the document, to the 850 to say what you can fulfill. And then the other one is the ASN. That's an advanced shipping notice. It is by the number, the standard is an 856. That's what it's called, an EDI standard. And so that's the advanced shipping notice. Now that's the most complex document of them all. And what I will do now next, I will go to the mailbag. And this is essentially like the inbox. And back to the ASN, that is that again is the most complicated document of all of them. And what you're essentially doing there is you are sending them the ship manifestation. And again, some companies don't use them. For example, Costco doesn't. Then you have such companies as Canadian Tire, they do. And what that document essentially does, first it's a document to say how that order is being fulfilled and in how many boxes or pallets it's being shipped, and the label that goes with that. And then what it does, it essentially helps these companies like Canadian Tire and others that use the ASN, it helps them to scan the barcode on that document, on the package, and reference that back to their system. So we would have sent the manifestation to them and the label that would go on the package. And so when it arrives at their dock, they just essentially have to scan it with their scanner, and now they know exactly what's in that package, how many quantities. So let's say you fulfilled an order of about 100 quantity of a given line item, or let's say 150 on another line item, and you now sent them 5 pallets with all these items on it. And what it does, you generate this ASN from within EDI4 Spire, and then you go in and attach the labels. And now when it gets to these companies, they scan the barcode and they know exactly what's in this box and where essentially it goes in their warehouse and stuff. So it just makes the order processing at the partner vendor and much more efficient for those companies that use that. So here I'm going to demonstrate a process from start to finish. So first, The one thing with the setup, with setting up a new partner, there is the inventory mapping. So what that essentially is that if your Spire part number and the partner part number are not the same. So for example, if in this case here, we can see some examples for staples. If your Spire part number in this case is 103500088, that's the partner part number, but your Spire part number is different. So then what you do here is you set a map. You map it. You basically specify in here what the partner part number is, and then your part number, and then you map it that way. And so that is if once the order is translated from an EDI document and it gets posted to Spire, that is so that now the partner numbers that will have been sent, they will now be translated into Spire. Now, if you have the same part number that your partner uses, then there's no need to map. Then it will just translate one-to-one. So that's the first part that needs to take place when setting up a new partner. And then the next one is the customer mapping. And what this is, the customer mapping here is to map the ship to location for the partner. And so here in this case, we have a Costco mapping. And so what it is, it's you have your ship to ID in Spire, and then you map that to a ship to ID that your partner's using. So then in this example, Costco, you have well over 100, I think it's 160 or something like that, stores across Canada. We'd have to look it up, I'm not sure what it is. And so then now you have to map each Costco location to one of your ship to addresses in Spire. So that's what takes place here at the customer mapping. So that's first, of course, setting up the partner, doing the certification with them, and I'll get into a bit more details on how that works later on, or just the testing. And then once that's all set up, now you come to the mailbag. And the way it works is as soon as they start sending you new orders, they will show up here in your mailbag. And you can have it set to get an email sent to you that new orders are awaiting you. And then what we have here is we have an option to filter for orders and do all of the transaction or actions that you would typically do with an order. So first thing is you can filter for orders. So let's say in the morning you have one individual responsible for processing all of your Costco orders. So you come and filter and you say, okay, I want to only see partner name, let's go Costco. And so now I'm only seeing Costco, and I believe it is only Costco orders that I have here, but let's take a look. Maybe I have a Staples one as well. No, I don't. So I only have Costco orders in this case. So then you can filter, and then you can filter by basically all possible fields by the purchase order date. So you can go and filter and say, I only want to see purchase orders for today. And then as well for the date when they were created in all these options here. So any field that you would essentially see in the grid view, you can go and take and filter by that, and so that you can very easily filter your orders. And second, with that as well, is that you can, for example, filter. And what I will do here, I will filter for Costco because that's the only orders I have. And I will now take and save this filter, and I will give it a name. I will say Costco orders, and I will save this filter. And now, next day I come back, and if my responsibility is the Costco orders, I will just go to my save filters and click on that filter, and it would now give me only the Costco orders. I could also take it one step further and say I would always want to see, for my filter, I would always want to see filter for today's orders for Costco. And so I could have the date here as well. And then anytime I would come back to my filter and click on it, it would always give me those Costco orders for that given day. And again, filters can be anything you would want. So that's the first thing, is you set up filters for your orders. And then the next step is now you can start performing actions against these orders. So here you can see, I briefly mentioned before, you have doc types. And a doc type is exactly what it is. It's an 850. And 850, again, it's a purchase order. And then you would also have doc types 860. And that is a correction to an 850. And the way we have this set up, I don't have any 860s here, is that the 850, if there's an associated 860 with an 850, you will see it in red here. And then you know that there's an 860 associated with the 850. So that's the first thing. Then you can come and perform actions against these orders. And so then the first thing that we allow to do, and again, so in this case, I briefly mentioned before the different types of documents that companies require. And so in this case, Costco only requires an invoice, and they send the 850. And then so back to the trading partners on this screen here, I have the option of specifying which documents they require. Here, Costco set up as requiring an ASN. That's not correct. And then based on that, you have actions that you can perform against these orders here. And so in this case, I can take and post this order to Spire. And so before that, you may want to view this order just so that you can see what's on it. So in here, in this case, you can clearly see that that there is no part number here, meaning that your part number and the partner part numbers would be the same. You do see the partner part number. So that just depends on the mapping that was created. And then you can look at all the other details of this order. You can see what the quantity is on it, the price, and so forth. So you can see all the details. You can print this order from here as well for if you want to keep a paper record of it. And then the next step is to go and post this order to Spire. And so that's what I'm going to do here. And so what's going to happen here is I'm going to click OK. Here's another thing I'm going to briefly explain. So and we have a setup where you can define what warehouse, the default warehouse that all orders go to. And then for example, if you have per partner specified that all the orders from that partner go into a specific warehouse, so that's what the system will do. It will post it into the warehouse that you've defined on a per partner basis. Or you can also enable it to on the fly being able to select the warehouse. So here I can, for example, post this Costco order, and they're selected to being able to post this to whatever warehouse at the time when you post it. So that's what I'm able to do here. So I'm going to post this order, and I'm going to post it to the 00 default Toronto warehouse. And so now this order is posted, and now I see my Spire order number. So now you have a way of knowing what the order is in Spire. And so now the next step, you go and fully manage that order in Spire and take care of it as terms of fulfilling and doing whatever you would typically do in Spire. And then you can go and follow the next step in EDI. So this is the order that was just created in Spire from what I did. And so what I'm going to do now with this order, I'm going to take and invoice it here. Now, again, this would, depending on your internal procedures, you may have to do some more, but you can basically go and invoice this. And the purchase order number on here will match that of the EDI when it came in. And as you saw on the EDI side, I'll go back there again. As you saw on the EDI side, I mentioned before that in this case, there's no mapping, that the partner part number is the same as the Spire part number. And so now when we look at this here, go back to that server, you can see that it's the same part number 0005, and you can see that it is in 00 warehouse. And then again, I had the option in this case, I had it enabled so that I could have posted this in Spire to a different warehouse while posting it on the fly. And so this is my order. We also have the option where you can immediately, when you post an order to Spire from EDI, you have the option of immediately committing that inventory in Spire. And so in this case, that option is enabled, so you can see that they order to, and it's immediately committed while posting. Again, that's an option that you can select whether you want that or not. And now what I'm going to do with this order, I'm going to go and take and invoice it here in Spire. And so I won't print an invoice. Okay, so that's done. It's invoiced now in Spire. And so now my next step for this order is to go and invoice it to the partner. And I did invoice this in Spire, but if I actually click this action option, create an invoice, and click on go, if it was not invoiced in Spire, it would give me a message to say that this order has not been invoiced in Spire. And so what will happen now, this order I won't get that message because it has been invoiced in Spire. And so I will click on go. And now the next thing that you'll see that will happen is here you now see that it's the Spire order number, the Spire invoice number, and the Spire invoice total. So we do show some information here as well from the Spire order itself. And so those are the two things. And so now you see under the action status, you see that it's posted, meaning that it was posted to Spire, and it's been invoiced. And you can click on these actions, and you can see the date when it was completed. And so these are the dates that were not the date that I was invoiced in Spire, but the date that it was done inside of EDI for Spire. That's what that's what this represents. And so then actually for testing purposes here, I will have to show what an ASN looks like. I will have to go back and actually enable that for Costco because I had it, even though, like I said, Costco does not require that. So you would never do this for Costco, but I have it enabled here so that I can just show how that functionality works. So what we do here, the ASN can be created at any point in time after it's been posted to Spire. So if you post something to Spire and then you can go and create an ASN. And so the ASN, like I said, that's the most complex part of the whole EDI process. And so I will go and click for this, or I will go and click on Go, create an ASI. And so here's where I define my ASI details. So it will be shipping tomorrow. The delivery date should be the 22nd. And the shipping tracking number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever. And the standard carrier. And these are all codes defined for standard carriers. Now these codes here, they are actually defined through the EDI standard. So there's a nonprofit organization in the world that defines all these standards. So if there's a new shipping company, they have to actually obtain the code from them. And these would be shipping companies that do ship major shipments. So for example, we have FedEx here. So FedEx obviously needs to be registered under the system as being one of the companies, and that means that this is a major company representative. And so then you will have some local companies that may not be registered with them, and it's not a big deal. Like for that purpose, we just added the other shipping company. It's not a big deal that the partner actually knows what shipping company is being used, but it's an EDI standard where you're supposed to define it. So FedEx in this case, and then the packaging code, again, these are standards that are defined by the EDI process. And here in this case, it could be a bag, a carton, a mix, customer container type, or a pallet, depending on who you work with. So far we have customers with Costco, we have Staples, Cabela's, TSC, and so there's several of them, and there may be more codes that we would add down the road based on what these partners require. But then you would basically select what the containers that you're shipping. And the FOB code, it's just a code to say who pays for the shipping. Again, there's some defined standards here. By default, it's by the seller. And then now you can come in here and define how many will go in this carton, or let's say this was a pallet in this case, and you're only shipping one of these per pallet. I would say 1, and then I will go and save my details. And now I've created one ASN, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go and create another ASN. And here, actually, we've made, just yesterday, we made some changes to this here, that this would actually default to the same information you previously entered, so it doesn't have to be re-entered again. And again, we'll just enter the tracking number and the ship carrier, the package type, again, a pallet and prepaid. And now it says here, total quantity, remaining quantity. So meaning you already have an ASN where you already shipped one of them. So like 1, and save details. And so there we go. Now I have my ASN completed to say exactly what I'm shipping and how much I'm shipping. And the next step now is to, you can, of course, come back here and edit the ASN. You can go and delete an ASN. And the next step is now to send the ASN. And what you're doing here is when you're sending the ASN, now you're actually going and sending this via EDI and say, here's the package. It's coming in pallets, and it says how many per pallet, what product, the shipping, the tracking. And the other important part here is that each package gets a serial number. It's a serial number, and that's behind the scenes. You don't see that from here, and you'll see that in a bit in the labels that I'm going to print. And what it is, it's a serial number that each package gets, and that serial number actually contains exactly the information that the vendor needs to know. So you're sending this to the partner or vendor to say, okay, here are the details about what's coming to you, and you click on submit. And it basically gives you a message saying the ASN will now be sent to the trading party. After sending the ASN, you will no longer be able to edit the ASN details. And so then now you're sending it. Okay, so you've sent the ASN now. And now the next step is now you're printing your labels for this ASN, these ASNs that you created. And so then that's what I'm going to do here now. I'm going to go and print a label. And so this is defined by a 4x6 label. That is the standard in EDI. They always have to be 4x6. Now, some partners have different needs for the label. They require more information on it, some less. So you can see a typical label looks like this: ship from and ship to. The postal code has to be in a barcode format so that it can be easily scanned at their end. And then you can see here's the carrier, it's FedEx that we defined there. Again, that's defined by that code, and their system will be able to translate that. The bill of lading, that's just the Spire order number. The Pro, that's actually your tracking number, and that says number of cartons. And then it says what it contains. And so what this is here, it's the purchase order number item. So if you're shipping only one per carton, then it's actually the part number, and if not, then it's mixed. Again, that's required. That's different. Companies have different requirements for that. And so then you're saying item description and carton quantity. And so some of them just literally require this to say mix. It doesn't matter if you actually define the part number, but some of them are very picky about that and need the actual details on the label. And so this is the serial number that I was mentioning previously. That is essentially when you send this ASN, you're sending it via EDI, and then when this package gets to their dock to put that anywhere. So in their system, they would essentially have defined that anytime this particular part number comes in, now here it says mix, but the actual document that was sent, they know exactly what part number is in this box. And so what this does in these very large warehouses, it basically does tell them which word will go. So a receiver comes and scans the barcode. They will literally know from their system that, oh yeah, this is going to go to aisle number 10 and on at level whatever system they would have in-house that would define where this inventory goes. So it's very, very easy. So the forklift driver will come and say, okay, they will already know based on what was scanned. They'll know exactly which aisle and which bin or whatnot it will go into. And so that's what makes this so easy for large companies to receive inventory. And again, the 856, the ASN process, that's the most complex process of all, and where you have to define that for them. And so that's what I just did. I created an ASN for Costco. Again, Costco does not use ASN. There are many companies that do not use ASNs. And but I showed it to you what it would look like if you would potentially send one to Costco. And so then again, under the action status, you can see that there was an ASN created, ASN sent, and you see exactly what you've completed against this order. And so now let's say I have finished completing all the action against this order and I don't need to see it anymore. I can now go and archive this order. We also have the option of doing multi-actions against orders. So for example, here, these orders, I believe they are all in the same state, not all of them, but I could go and select multiple orders and perform an action. So for example, if I had completed all these orders and I was ready to archive them, I would now just select, say, archive selected orders. We also have the option where you can invoice an archive. So if you, that's typically the last step that you would perform against an order, you would invoice it in an archive. And so that's what you select, and now you can go and create the invoice and archive. Now, in terms of in the back end here, what takes place, it's all runs based on a configured options where when you click submit here, send, then the backend communications takes place to actually send these documents via EDI. And again, the most popular option for sending documents is through a couple major EDI providers in the world. It's the same idea as a telephone company. So there's a couple of them, major companies across the world that exchange the documents for you. So we send it to the this provider and they send it to them. And so the way it works is when initially a partner is being set up, we actually have a contract with them, and then we have to contact them and say, okay, we have a new customer we are bringing on, and we are going to be exchanging documents with Costco, and then it gets all set up on theirs and their system, so that once we start sending documents to whatever partner it is, they are routed the proper way. And again, same idea as a phone company. That's the principle behind it. So that is the mailbag, and then of course I can come to my archive orders, and I can now look. I've only archived one here in this case. Again, it's just a demo setup. And I can now go and move this to, again, back to the mailbag. So let's say I was not fully done with this order and I need to see that order back in the mailbag again, so I can perform additional action against it. So I can move this back to the mailbag. And so that is pretty much in general how that works in terms of how an order comes in, how you post it to Spire, and then how you manage this all from EDI for Spire. And so this is all web-based. So there is, for setting up the EDI on your end, there is nothing to install on your environment. It essentially just requires for us, or if you have a Spire partner or an IT provider, to configure the Spire server with the API, just to configure that portion of it. And then you can start exchanging documents. So nothing to install on your end. It's completely web-based. All you need is you need to have a browser installed on your computer. Of course, everyone does. And then you log in. So in this case, it's dev.edi4spire.com. And you get a username and password, and off you go. So that is, in short, what EDI for Spire does and how it works. Any questions from anyone? I'm going to attempt to see if I can, if there's a way. Yes, I'm able to unmute people here if you would like to ask a question. Just raise your hand. I believe you have that option. Yeah, you have an option to raise your hand. And so if you raise your hand, I will enable it so that you are allowed to talk, and then you can ask your question in real time if you like. So again, just you'll see an option there where you can raise your hand, and then you can ask your questions in real time. As well, just if you want to, just type your question under the question and answers, and another option as well, go to the chat window and ask your questions there as well. Let me see, can I think of anything else to show? No, I think that's it. So customer mapping, inventory mapping. The other option I didn't show, it's the tax code mapping. So that's very important if you invoice companies, of course, in Canada, so you'll be charging them taxes, and it could be GST, HST. So what you have to do here, you have to map your tax codes from your Spire database to the EDI tax code standard. So EDI, again, it's standard across the board. So for every tax that we have in Canada, you'll find a matching code for EDI. And so these are the ones where it's the GST and then the HST. So that's all mapped. That's another mapping part that has to be done as well. Okay, so I see a couple questions here. All right, so we use multiple vans with multiple trading partners. How does EDI Spire integrate with these external vans? So then, and then also the next question, can you show us how sales orders are actually imported into Spire? So sales orders, that's all behind the scene. That is through the API. So we use, so your second question there, Cyril, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. That's all behind the scene. That's actually in the code. And so what we do, we use the Spire API. So Spire has a very sophisticated API, very convenient to use. And so that is actually what's being used here. So then again, behind the scenes and how the orders are imported, it's all in the code itself in EDI for Spire. There's nothing where I actually could show you the actual procedure to take place. Basically what it is, you go to the mailbag and you go and select an action. You say post to Spire, I click on go, and here again, I'll select a different warehouse, and done. So now actually it has, what EDI for Spire has done here, talk to the API, and it posted this order in Spire. So that's how that works. To your next question, to your first question that you asked, you said we use multiple vans with multiple trading partners. So yes, this is very common actually, where you would, for example, want to deal with, let's say, Canadian Tire. So Canadian Tire is using SPS Commerce for their trading. So they don't do that in-house. SPS Commerce takes care of all of that for Canadian Tire. And so then what often happens is people sign up to work with Canadian Tire, and then Canadian Tire hands that off to SPS Commerce. And SPS Commerce basically says, okay, yeah, here are your options. And typically what SPS Commerce or some of the other ones will tell you, they say, well, ours is proprietary to Canadian Tire, so you have to work with us. And so then what often happens is companies are thinking that they're stuck, that their only option is to work with SPS Commerce and they have no other way of working with this. And so that's not actually correct. And that's what SPS Commerce would most likely have you believe. And the way it works is if you let's say you are new to EDI and you want to start trading and you want to, assuming you're wanting to trade with Canadian Tire, you would be handed off to SPS Commerce. SPS Commerce again would tell you that, hey, you need to work with us. We are proprietary to them. Then you basically need to tell them and say, hey, we have an EDI provider and we want to use them. And so then SPS Commerce would transfer you to a different department, and then that's where now a certification process needs to begin. So then the first step is that you get that department in touch with us and you say, here's our new EDI provider and we want to use them for all of our EDI documents. And so then we go through the certification process for you and do all the required things. And so again, then it totally depends on what the companies require. So Canadian Tire, do they use the 850, 860, which is, again, that's the most common and that's what companies do use. But then do they use the advanced shipping notice? Do they use PO acknowledgements? And I can't think of a few other ones that may also be used. And so then we need to know, and that through that certification process, they basically set up a portal, a certification portal, and with a login, and then in the portal it says exactly what we all need to certify for. And then you go through the whole process of certification with them. And typically that can take 2 to 3 weeks. That's a quite lengthy process when certification is required. And mainly is that you get one of Canadian Tire's documents sent from SPS Commerce, and then we have to make sure we translate that document and that our translation is ready. So then, because each company has different requirements, different parts of EDI that they use, so then we have to go through the process of mapping it from the EDI engine. That's a background engine that's running that you don't see here. Again, that completely happens in the background. So we have to then, from that EDI engine, we have to now map that so that we can bring that order into EDI for Spire. So that all takes place during the certification process. And so then once we're done with the certification process, then in the portal, they basically show, yeah, all the tests that we needed to do are complete. And then you are contacted again by the ASPS representative, and you say, okay, we are ready to start trading live now. And then the next thing you know is now orders are all coming in through EDI for Spire in this case. So that is the way it works. And so then when you're saying you're asking about dealing with multiple vans, that's essentially how all of them work. So if you're currently dealing with several of them, that just means that you likely, and you can confirm this, maybe I'm wrong about this, but you likely have just started dealing with different partners, and they've just different vendors, partners, and they have just always sent you to the one that they use that does all the EDI for them. And then you start logging into their portals and basically taking orders from there and manually keying them into Spire. So that is the most typical process. And then, for example, another one that we recently did, we did Toys R Us for another customer, and they had a separate certification process that we had never gone through, and that was similar. Again, it was the same idea that literally the company could have actually gone just to them directly and just log into their portals and manually inputting those orders into Spire. And so that's why. And so that's how you would consolidate all of your value added networks, the vendors, the vans. You would consolidate them is by, for each of them, going through the certification process by using our services. And as well, then let's say, assuming you're dealing with Costco. So Costco is the most simplest one that I can think of, and that's why I'm using them as for demonstration purposes. You basically just go to them and you give them your documents, and they look them over and they email you back and say, hey, there's a few things you need to change, and off you go. And so that's the easiest one to work with. But yeah, so that's how you consolidate. Does that answer your question? Hey, yes, so that did answer your question. Any other questions from anyone? Is there anything else you would like me to show you? Again, if anyone would like to speak, ask a question via audio, just let me know to raise your hand, and I will see that here, and then I will allow you to speak. You're also free to email me your questions if you have any. And I will be recording this. I'm recording this webinar as well. If you have another team member, anyone else who would like to see the presentation, you are welcome to drop me an email, and I will send a link to the recording of the webinar. Let's see, any other questions here? No more questions. Anyone else? And you'll all have my contact information, my email, and the email that I sent. So by all means, feel free to contact me. Another thing that I should perhaps briefly mention is the costs of certification and sending and receiving documents. So the certification process is different from almost every vendor. Like I said, Costco is the most simplest one that we've ever worked with. In some ways, I'm surprised how a big retail chain like Costco would not have more sophisticated methods to receiving goods, but they don't. And obviously, the way they work, everything gets sent directly to stores. They do not send anything. Well, there's the one customer we have, there's a few orders a year when it comes to around Christmas where it actually gets sent to their main warehouse and then it gets distributed to the stores. So very little bit, and so that's why Costco obviously is a lot simpler, and it is that inventory does not get received or shipped to a large warehouse and then distributed to the stores. And so Canadian Tire is such a store, so they have large distribution centers. Same thing for Walmart. You ship to the distribution centers for the most part, I believe. Canadian Tire especially, I know. And then the main warehouse, the distribution center, then sends it off to the store. So that's why they have more requirements. Like especially the 856 certification for sending ASNs and the labels and so forth. So then in terms of cost for our services, so the certification process, so it totally depends on what the certification process is like with the vendor that you are trading with. And that's depends. And so then you can contact me and I can also do a one-on-one presentation or answer additional questions and discuss the pricing for getting you going and for sending ongoing documents and so forth. And so then I am not sure if all of you are on Spire already or if you're thinking about moving. So I know that we've done some conversions where people were using a different provider. Some of you may know Redtail is the most common provider because they've been, for the longest time, the only one who did this for Business Vision. So they're the only one that people would go to. So essentially what we are a competitor to Redtail. So if you have heard of Redtail or are using them currently with Business Vision, we are the competitor and also offering an EDI solution now. And again, that's for those of you who may still be on BV and looking for a solution for Spire. Any other questions? So it does not look like it. I will take and end this webinar now. And again, if you have any questions or anything or would like to discuss your specific needs, please do send me an email and we can schedule a call, or I can also answer questions via email. Again, thank you for taking the time on Thursday afternoon. Appreciate the time that you've taken, and then I will perhaps, I'm not sure if some of you are going to the Spire conference coming up in a week and a half, I believe. If you're going to be there, I will be there as well, presenting this solution and some of our other solutions as well. Our e-commerce solutions is one of them, our mobile app, and as well a commission app as well. So if you're going to be there, make sure to look me up. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.